bit of history, but I think it's very instructive for us today. This was the way that America was to be brought into the war. It was through a terrorist attack, the sinking of the Lusitania. This is taken from the book Creature from Jekyll Island, page 260, 261. It says neutral nations, let's see. Since neutral nations were prohibited from doing that by treaty, that was helping other governments who were in the war, America would have to be brought into the war. A secret agreement was made between British officials and Colonel Edward Mandell House. He was basically, as Woodrow Wilson said, Edward Mandell House was my other self. Edward Mandell House basically ran Woodrow Wilson. It says, from that point on, a secret agreement was made between the British and House with the concurrence of Woodrow Wilson. From that point on, Woodrow Wilson began to pressure Congress to declare war. This was done at the very time Woodrow Wilson was campaigning for re-election on the slogan, "He kept us out of the war." So what is Griffin saying? Behind the scenes, Woodrow Wilson was planning with Edward Mandell House to bring America into World War I. While he was planning that behind the scenes, he was trying to be re-elected to the presidency. And you know how he was trying to get re-elected? He was telling the American people, "I've kept your boys out of this war, therefore vote for me." Now that's a lie, isn't it? The President of the United States was lying to the American people, planning to bring us into the war, and running on a ticket that said, "I've kept you out of the war, now vote for me." Well, what was the Lusitania? The Lusitania was a large ship. It was owned by the British Cunard Lines, which was a fleet of ships. The Lusitania was built to military specifications and was registered with the British Admiralty as an armed auxiliary cruiser. The Lusitania carried passengers as a cover to conceal her real mission, which was to bring contraband war materials from the United States. This fact was known to Woodrow Wilson and others in his administration, but they didn't do anything to stop it. When the German embassy tried to publish a warning to American passengers, the State Department intervened and prevented newspapers from printing it. When the Lusitania left New York Harbor on her final voyage, she was virtually a floating ammunition depot. Now, what is Edward Griffin saying? He's simply saying this. The Lusitania was carrying a lot of civilians across the Atlantic Ocean. But the Lusitania was such a large ship, it wasn't just carrying passengers, it was also carrying war materials that the Americans were sending over to the British. So if the Lusitania was ever attacked, because it had so many war materials on board, it was like a walking powder keg. It would blow to smithereens. G. Edward Griffin also said there that the German embassy in America warned and said, "Don't any Americans get on board the Lusitania. If you do, you're putting your life into danger." But G. Edward Griffin also brings out that the Germans' warning to the American people was never allowed in the newspapers. There's only one newspaper that was in the Des Moines Register. That was the only newspaper that was allowed to run the ad put in there by the German embassy to warn the Americans not to go on the Lusitania. So what happens? The British knew that to draw the United States into the war would mean the difference between defeat and victory. And anything that could accomplish that was proper. Did you notice that? Anything you can kill, you can maim, you can destroy, you can destroy however many millions of people you need to, as long as you get what you want. The end justifies the means. Now, obviously, there weren't millions of people on the Lusitania, but the point was, they would sacrifice innocent people to get what they wanted. And that was, they wanted America in the war. Now, does that make you think about anything? Were there innocent people in the 21st century who were innocent pawns in the great big game of the Jesuit order, and they were sacrificed on a date called September 11th, 2001, in order to bring America into the Third War? The trick was to have Americans on board the Lusitania in order to create the proper emotional climate in the United States. As the Lusitania moved into hostile waters, they're heading towards Europe, they're getting closer and closer to shore. There was a German U-boat operating. The First Lord of the British Admiralty, a man by the name of Winston Churchill. You ever heard that guy's name? Oh, blood, sweat, and tears, right? Winston Churchill was a part of this game, folk. He was a player in the Jesuits' plan to take over the world. That's who Winston Churchill really was. Winston Churchill ordered her destroyer protection to abandon her. You see, there was at least one ship that as the Lusitania approached, another ship was to go out and act as a protector to bring the Lusitania safely to harbor. But Winston Churchill told the ship to abandon its purpose. It was to withdraw and not get anywhere near the Lusitania. Why? Because the Lusitania was to be destroyed. Not only did he do that, the Lusitania had been ordered to travel at reduced speed, which made her an easy target. After the German U-boat hit the Lusitania with one well-placed torpedo, a mighty second explosion from within the Lusitania ripped her apart. And the ship that many believe could not be sunk gurgled to the bottom in less than 18 minutes. And the day it happened, Woodrow Wilson went to the Rose Garden there at the White House, and he said, I knew the Lusitania was going to be bombed. I knew that Churchill was a bad guy. We've got to get those guys for destroyed, didn't he? No, he didn't. You know what Woodrow Wilson said? He said, America, do you want to see your freedom sacrificed at the hands of these German people who are trying to destroy democracy? Do you want to see that? And what is any American going to say? Any American's going to say, we're going to go fight them, let's go! And so America went to war built on the lie that we were going to keep the world safe and America's freedoms would be left intact. So we would fight for freedom and democracy. Save freedom and democracy, Woodrow Wilson told the American people. And it took the American people all of about a day or two to be ready for war. All built on the lie that this war would save America's freedom.